political economist at the University of Jaffna in Sri Lanka. Thanks for joining us here on TRT World. Why is Sri Lanka suffering a lack of foreign exchange? Is it a lack of tourists from the pandemic, or perhaps economic mismanagement?
It's a combination of factors. Sri Lanka has been living beyond its means for many years, and we've had rising debt. We have been borrowing in the international capital markets, international sovereign bonds, which make up 40% of our international debt stock. So all of that together has made our debt situation unsustainable. But we were really pushed over the cliff with the pandemic when suddenly tourism completely came to a halt. And along with that, there was also mismanagement by this regime. So it's a combination of factors. And more recently, with the war in Ukraine, global oil prices have been on the rise, so have fertilizers and many of our imports. All of this is also partly because Sri Lanka has moved away from self-sufficiency in agriculture and in other essentials, which has also now led to a very serious food crisis. Even the price of bread has tripled, the price of rice has more than doubled. So we are looking at very difficult times ahead for the people.
Okay, so tell me, what would it take for these issues to be fixed? What are the long-term changes that a new president needs to make to fix these problems?
I think the immediate priority is the food situation. We have to make sure that there is going to be enough food so that we don't go into a famine situation in the next few months. So they really have to prioritize the food system, which means encouraging the farmers and the fisher folk to start producing, because many parts of Sri Lanka are still rural. And then slowly start thinking about the kind of economic reforms that would be necessary by prioritizing our imports in terms of the essential goods, implementing a public distribution system so that we can get the priority goods to our people. I think this is going to be a very long, drawn-out crisis, possibly 5 years to a decade, like what we saw in Greece. It's probably going to be a lost decade. And during that time, we just have to first make sure that we can feed our people, that malnutrition doesn't set in. So the new leadership has to have a very different vision of the economy to be able to address this current crisis.
Okay, now, Ahilan, you mentioned reforms. Help us understand, what are those reforms?
One, Sri Lanka has had rising inequality in the country. So there needs to be particularly tax reforms where the wealthier sections of this country have to be taxed to be able to pay for the state expenditure. Our tax revenue is abysmally low compared to international standards. It's probably less than 8% of GDP now. But amidst an economic crisis, it's also going to be very difficult to increase indirect taxes, such as what you pay for all commodities. They have to, even income taxes are going to be difficult. So they might have to consider something like a wealth tax on accumulated wealth over the years. So tax reforms are crucial. Priority in terms of government investment. Over the last decade, there was huge amount of investment in the tourism sector, in infrastructure, in hotels that have not provided the kind of returns in terms of the investment. So prioritizing our investment in terms of food production, but also sectors that are export-oriented in manufacturing would be important. So a clear industrial policy for the long haul is necessary as well.
All right, Ahilan Kadirgamar, thank you very much for talking to us here on TRT World.